2. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Happy Monday, guys. I hope you guys had a great Memorial Day. Thank you to all our veterans who are serving. I appreciate your service. And we want to remember today, especially those who pay the ultimate sacrifice, so that people like me can broadcast and have free speech mostly. So happy Memorial Day, guys. I hope you paused and took a little bit of a break to remember how many people truly they gave everything in order so that we can enjoy our freedom. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about mold. So if you're watching right now, make sure that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. I would appreciate that as well. I want to make sure that we are streaming on all of our platforms as well: Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and also the wonderful people on Instagram. So tonight I'm going to be talking about mold, specifically water damage mold, not environmental mold or anything like that, but we're going to talk specifically about water damage mold. I think this is something that gets missed quite a bit. It's also something that people don't want to deal with if it's happening in their house as well. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you something. Please make sure you watch this all the way through, because it's critical that you understand the first steps that you need to take. And that's, we're not going to go over everything about mold, but we're going to understand some of the big idea behind it and some of the first steps that you need to take. Okay. So tonight, one of the things I'm going to talk about is mold mycotoxicity. We're going to ask the question, what is it? What are some of the symptoms that you can have? And how do you test for mold? Not only if it's in your body, but how can you test your indoor environment, especially? So there's two different ways that you can be able to test for that. Now, I want to make sure that we're very, very clear that we are talking about mold from water damage inside your home or inside of your workplace. We're not going to be talking about environmental mold from your outside environment. Okay. So, like when the weatherman, and if you're able to see the slides, you'll notice that the weatherman will say, hey, the mold count's high today. Well, he's talking about environmental mold. That's why they also talk about, high amounts of allergens and things like that. There's a difference between environmental mold and specifically water damage mold. So we're going to talk specifically about water damage mold. Okay. Now, here is one of the important things. One of the important things that I'm going to talk about what's making me sick. And I'm going to talk about this at our next upcoming inflammation talk. That's going to be Tuesday, June 4th. And you can go to our Linktree profile and register for that if you're from the Chicagoland area. But here's what's really interesting is when people aren't feeling very well, you really have to ask the question, what on earth is making me sick? What's making me sick? And the things that are making you sick are going to be something that's irritating the immune system. Okay. And then number two, having a lot of chronic mental stress. Ladies, especially chronic mental stress. So always think immune and think stress. Immune, stress, immune, stress. Now, the tricky part is where to actually find it, because it's usually not just one source. It usually can be multiple sources. And if you can understand what can constantly be irritating the immune system, you get a lot better understanding of your digestive process, your hormones, your thyroid, and everything else. Because when we talk about the immune system, we talk about inflammation specifically. Okay. So let's ask the question, what is mold? And this comes from the CDC. So this comes straight from the horse's mouth. Okay. Now you can see what I highlighted here. Mold will grow where there is moisture, such as around leaks in roofs, windows, or pipes, or where there has been a flood. So it's very important that you guys pay attention to all of those things, especially if your indoor environment has been exposed to a lot of water. Mold grows on paper, cardboard, ceiling tiles, and wood. Mold can also grow in dust, very important, paints, wallpaper, insulation, drywall, carpet, fabric, and upholstery. So basically, mold can literally grow anywhere, especially when there's a lot of moisture or something in your indoor environment. Okay. Now, if you can see this picture here, we had a woman who was just riddled with so much mold. it took her a long time to be able to recover, a long time to be able to recover. So she was making a beautiful recovery. And then all of a sudden she said, Doc, I got to see you. And I asked her, I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I have felt like horrible, like exactly like I did when I had so much mold um, in my house. Like, what do you think is going on? I'm like, well, you were doing good. And I know that you moved and you're probably getting exposed to mold again. And she pulled out her phone and she showed me a picture that looked a lot like this. And what she showed me is she showed me paint on the wall that was starting to bubble and crack. And I said, yeah, there's mold in the environment that you're in right now. So there's no doubt about it. So if you see this in your house, just rest assured that you probably have a lot of water damage. And underneath that paint is probably mold growing, which is why the paint is cracking and peeling and bubbling up. So you got to pay attention to all of those things. So mold mycotoxicity, what are some of the symptoms of this? Okay. I could spend hours and hours talking about symptoms, but I want to highlight some of the biggest things that maybe a lot of people, they don't pay attention to. Number one, skin rashes. Okay. So if you're getting a lot of skin rashes, that can be an immune response from breathing in mold mycotoxins and having a reaction to it as well. Um, Heavy menstrual bleeding or not having a menstrual cycle at all. So heavy menstrual bleeding can be a real issue, only because it starts to affect the liver and how it's able to be able to get rid of certain hormones, and it also affects gallbladder function as well. You can develop severe allergies. Now, have you guys ever heard of mast cell activation syndrome, or MCAS? So if you look at these people who are just suffering tremendously, one of the first things that you want to look at is you want to say, there's got to be a problem with mold. And just remember this, because most of the time you're breathing in mold and you're having a massive immune system response as a result. You can have issues with frequent urination, severe food allergies, or what people will call as an intolerance, but it's really an allergic response. It's an immune response. Chronic musculoskeletal pain. If you're constantly getting sick and you don't really know why, or if you carry a lot of co-infections. What I mean by that is a lot of co-infections within the gastrointestinal system, or if you got co-infections, specifically when you're talking about Epstein-Barr virus and things like that. You can also develop kidney problems. So in the absence of blood sugar issues, people got a lot of kidney problems going on, that I'm thinking mold, like right off the bat. It can cause problems with low testosterone, thyroid issues that no one seems to be able to number one, maybe even recognize, but number two, be able to kind of figure out, hey, this isn't really following a pattern as well. Chronic fatigue syndrome is huge. How about this? Exercise intolerance, meaning you know that you should exercise. You go and you decide, hey, I'm going to do a CrossFit workout, and then you're in bed for the next 6 days after that. That can be a symptom of mold mycotoxicity. So severe exercise intolerance. And then also having problems losing weight. Okay. Having problems losing weight can be a huge issue, because there could be something that's really irritating the immune system as well. Now, there's a lot of other things that are related to mold, but I want to just highlight some of the biggest things that are going on. In short, mold from water damage is going to make you feel hazy, crazy, and lazy. Okay. Hazy, crazy, and lazy are some of the symptoms of mold mycotoxicity. And you have to look at, when you're having a massive immune system response, all of those things can happen. Yes. And POTS is actually one of them. Okay. Now, I want to show you an actual mold test that we did on a patient. My biggest regret is that we didn't get to this right away, because she had some thyroid issues that are going on, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, very high TPO antibodies. We saw these things go down, and then when she went back to school, being a teacher, went into an environment that wasn't very good, we saw her antibodies just jump way up. And it wasn't because she was doing the wrong things, but she was getting exposed to things that her immune system wasn't very happy with. She also started to get unexplained weight gain. She developed a uterine fibroid, and none of this was explained by having a poor lifestyle. So she did everything that I asked her to do, but things started to go sideways when she went into a very bad environment that she was in for 7, 8 hours, 5 days a week. Okay. So finally I said, hey, you know what? We need to test for mold. And you'll see that when we tested for mold, this is called a mosaic mycotoxin profile. And yes, you can actually get this test and you can take it. And you can see that she tested very high in aflatoxin, off the charts in ochratoxin, which is a water damage mold, and then also in citrinin. So she was high in 3 different types of mold that she was excreting. Now, if you actually look at what some of these molds are involved with, they're involved with neurotoxicity. They're involved with increasing oxidative stress, which means it's just going to cause a lot of damage to your cells. It can cause immunotoxicity, hepatotoxicity, and that explains a lot of it because remember, she was not metabolizing her estrogens very well, and this is one of the reasons why that she developed a uterine fibroid. Just remember, the uterus responds to a hormone trigger. Okay, and if you cannot metabolize, excrete those things from your liver, excrete it into the gallbladder, into the intestines, and then remove it, then you're going to have a lot of problems with that. So these mold mycotoxins are known carcinogens. They're known to cause issues with the kidneys. They can cause some issues with GI toxicity. So you may be working with someone and you're doing everything you can to help the gastrointestinal system, but this can cause some issues with GI toxicity. And one of the things I've noticed clinically is that if people really struggle with mold, they tend to have a lot of IgG food allergies as well. And these are also known as reproductive toxins. Aflatoxin, citrinin, and ochratoxin can really affect the reproductive system as well. So the question is not environmental mold, but where can water damage mold grow? Okay, where can water damage mold grow? I will tell you that water damage mold grows wherever there is moisture being carried in your house. Okay. So where are you getting the moisture from? Well, it may be coming from a plumbing leak. It may be coming from windows that don't keep, moisture out. It can be coming from roof leaks. It can also be carried in very high humidity homes. This is why it can be a lot bigger problem in like the southeast, along the Gulf of Mexico, because there's a lot more humidity there. And what's interesting is when you go to the Caribbean and you stay at like a resort, you'll notice that none of them actually have carpeting. They all have tile floors because they don't want mold to be within the carpeting because of the humidity that is carried in the environment. So once you get some humidity in the house, this is why it's important to have something that regulates humidity on your furnace. And yes, you can do that. You want to set it probably set at about 70%. But if there's high humidity being carried within the HVAC, the heating, ventilation, cooling systems within the ductwork, you can start to grow mold within the dust. Now, a lot of times when I say, hey, I want to check and see if you have mold, people are like, I don't see any leaks. You don't have to see it because some of that can be growing behind the drywall. So, and it doesn't take very long for it to grow. It takes 48 hours basically of having moisture before it can actually start to grow, and it can start to get blown around within the house as well. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about another thing too that can cause some issues, and that can be breast implants. Can breast implants actually carry mold? The answer is yes. Okay. Now, I've talked a lot about breast implants, how they're just like a constant sliver. You put something within the body that doesn't belong there, the immune system will start to work on it. If there happens to be any mold on the breast implants, remember, what does mold like to grow in? A dark and moist, wet environment, which can be a perfect environment for mold. But I've seen some people have breast implant illness, and they think it's all because my breast implants, they get it out and they don't get any better. Well, they're probably carrying a lot of mold, and it could be from the breast implants, or it could be from their external environment as well. Here's an actual mycotoxin test that we did on an individual, and you can see when she did the first test, gliotoxin was very high, but then she was off the chart in mycophenolic acid. Okay. So you can see off the charts. And then when we retested again, you can see gliotoxin went down to 0, and her mycophenolic acid also went way down as well. You know what's interesting about this is that there are medications that contain mycophenolic acid. Okay. So some medications contain mold that they will give you in order to suppress the immune system. So there are certain medications that have mold in it because doctors know that certain molds can absolutely suppress the immune response. Um, and so specifically when someone gets an organ transplant, they'll give them a medication in order to knock down the immune system, so that, and it's basically mold based, as well. So once we actually got her, she got started working on getting her health back. She actually was able to, on her own will and volition, be able to discontinue some of the medications that she was taking. And you can see that she started, the amount of excretion started to go way down. Okay. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Dr. Nate, what's worse, inhalation or ingestion? Because if you go on social media, you'll see people talk about coffees and mold, or food and mold and things like that. And it's not that you should just completely ignore that and ignore it, but I will say this: inhalation is much worse than ingesting it. The reason why is because if you ingest any kind of food and there happens to be mold with it as well, remember the first place it goes to is in your stomach. So if it goes in your stomach first, you have something known as hydrochloric acid, which is there to sterilize the food. This is why, if you look at a lot of people, if they're chronically stressed, they're constantly in fight or flight, they're always going to have low stomach acid. And that's just kind of one of the biggest triggers if you want to have incomplete protein breakdown, if you want food to stay in your stomach for long periods of time, if you want a gallbladder that's just not moving the way that it's supposed to develop and precipitates into stones, um, or if you want even constipation, be on low stomach acid. And when these people, when they take these proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux, they think they have too much stomach acid, and they don't. They have too little stomach acid. Your body doesn't make too much stomach acid. But when we test them, especially in stool, they always are carrying infection. And that's because if you lower stomach acid down, you are going to cause problems with your body's ability to break down your proteins, number one. And then number two, to be able to properly sterilize your food. That's why it's so important. So, Doc, what do I need to do? What on earth do I need to do? Like, where do I start with this whole puzzle? Let me help you make it a little bit more simple for you, okay? What do you need to do? The first thing they will always say is to test. Please test. Now, make sure that you write this down if you have a pen handy, or go back and watch it if you can't get to it. But what do you as far as testing the external environment? I would say one of the best tests out there, and I have nothing to do with this, is called the dusttest.com. So go to the dusttest.com, because that will test a person's home environment. Okay. That will test the environment of where there could be mold. So it's either in the home or it could be in your workplace as well. Yes, we have done ERMI tests, ERMI tests, as well. Those are just a little bit more difficult to analyze. And so that's why I'm moving towards the dusttest.com, because it gives you a really good report. I think they do a phone call with you as well to go over the results. So the dusttest.com, and if you'll see those three options, I probably would choose the middle option out of the three. And then how you test for inside of your body is the mycotoxin test by Mosaic Diagnostics. Okay. So you want to test, is it in my environment? Is it in my body? Okay. Because once it's inside your body, your immune system is really going to have a problem with it as well. So the first thing is you got to test. You got to test first and foremost. You don't guess, you have to test. And the reason why is some of the things that we do are dependent on the type of mold that you might be carrying. When I say that, I mean like certain binders. So things that help to bind the mold are different based on the type of mold that you might be carrying. So some of it might be probiotics, some of it might be charcoal, some of it might be a lot of other things, but it just depends on the type of mold that you have within your body. So you got to, number one, test. Number two, you have to get out of the environment. Okay. Now, I always tell people you really got to get out of the environment first and foremost. And I've had people that their homes were just riddled with mold, and I told them you got to move. You have to move and get yourself 6 weeks out of the environment. And I had a person that was breaking out in hives literally like every single week, and once she got out of the environment, her body started to calm down and settle down because she started to move those mycotoxins out of the body. Some people have a real hard time with it as well, which means they got to work a lot harder and they got to take a lot more binders and they got to be a lot more patient when it comes to it. So you got to get out of the environment. And so that's going to be important. But if you are currently in this situation, one of the things that we recommend is known as a triad air. Okay. And I have a link to it that you can get it in our Linktree profile as well, because the solution to pollution is dilution. And it's not something that has a big HEPA filter on it. And you got to change those every single month. We don't recommend those. This is a good solution that requires very little maintenance to it as well. So you got to get out of the mold environment. So you have to start cleaning the air, but then you also should do something with remediation. Okay. Now, I will say this is that when it comes to remediating mold, it's the Wild West out there. And so, that's why it's very, very tough to find someone who's good as well. And then you got to remove the mold from the body. And that's why things like binders, certain antioxidants can really, really help you. But again, it's going to be very specific to the type of mold that you're going to have inside of your body. I will also say this is why a far infrared sauna can be very beneficial, because when it comes to removing mold, you pee it out, you poop it out, you also sweat it out too. So this is why for some people who, if they have a ton of mold, we'll get them into the sauna, 2 or 3 times a week in order to just start sweating. What's interesting is a lot of times they won't sweat. And then as they start to get better, they start sweating a whole heck of a lot easier as well. You just got to make sure that if you go into a sauna, as soon as you get out of it, dry yourself off, get all the stuff off your skin, and try to shower as quickly as possible. All right. Now, here is the actual dust test. Here's a picture of it. So if you go to the dusttest.com, you can actually order this, and there's instructions on how to do it. It's very easy to do. But basically you use some of the dust and you collect it, and then they're going to do testing on what they collect in the dust to see if there is what type of mold there might be, if it's environmental, or if it's coming from actual water damage. This is a good test in order to get. Okay. Now, someone's going to ask me this, so I want to answer this question. Don't test and remediate with the same company. You guys see a conflict of interest there, is that if someone is a mold remediator and you decide I need to see if we have mold inside the house, chances are they're probably going to find something that's going on. So you really shouldn't be testing and remediating with the same company, because they can technically create the problem and then also give you the solution when you might not have a problem that's going on. So that's why we say use an outside company. The dust test, don't do a tape test, guys. That stuff is absolutely worthless. You need to do the dust test in order to see. And then if you do see a high amount of water damage mold that's taken place, then you got to look at, okay, where is it coming from? What do I need to do? How do I start cleaning the air? Do I need to pull up my carpeting? All those things. And depending on how bad it is, yes, you might need to do all of that. That's why I say this, guys, don't try to empty the bucket if you keep filling it up. Okay. If you're in a rowboat and you notice, and you're halfway through the lake and you notice, hey, my rowboat's filling up with water, the first thing that I would do, rather than trying to just feverishly try to get all the water out of the boat, I would first look for what's filling up the boat too. And that same thing applies, is you don't want to try to get all of this mold out of your house, or try to filter it, or try to get it out of the body if you stay in the environment that's creating it as well. Just like I said before, the solution to pollution is dilution. Okay. And this is why, if you look at the Environmental Protection Agency, they say your indoor environment is much more toxic than your external environment. And I actually agree with that, because if your indoor environment has a lot of mold in it, then it absolutely is. And this is why one of the things I'm a big fan of, because sometimes people can't do everything at once, but I'm a big fan. If you can make your air cleaner, then I'm 100% 100% behind that as well. So earlier on in the week, if you guys go to my Linktree profile, you'll find it in our description of this video. You'll also find it if you go to the top of the page, and it's Linktree, and you'll see that you actually can get a My Triad Air, and it's an indoor air purification. No, it doesn't push things through a HEPA filter that can get clogged. Basically what it does is it pushes the air through, creates an electric charge on some of the dust particles so that they start to clump together, and it starts to make it heavier so that some of these mold mycotoxins aren't staying suspended in the air. It forces them to just start to drop back down to the ground so that you're not constantly breathing some of those things in. I will tell you this, we have one running in our office. We have one running in our home as well. And if you go to our Linktree, you can actually purchase a My Triad Air, and you'll actually save quite a bit of money when you purchase it. And full disclosure, yes, I do make a little bit from it, as well. But I'm only going to recommend something that I already use myself. And I actually have a couple of these units that run in our office and also in our home as well. So if you go over there, you'll be able to get that. And it just makes your indoor air environment a whole heck of a lot cleaner. If you are in the presence of mold, I would actually recommend getting that and starting to run that right away in order to just try to clean out the air as much as possible. Okay. So guys, if you are living in a water damaged environment, I have seen the long-term effects of what happens. There's a lot of long-term effects that can take place. And this is why I've seen a lot of people, even with autoimmunity, when I ask them about mold, they're like, oh yeah, I grew up, with tons of mold in my environment as well. But guys, no matter what's happening, if you have issues with inflammation, if you're from the Chicagoland area, please make sure you come to our next inflammation talk, Tuesday, June 4th at 6:00 p.m. If you are having some challenges when it comes to weight loss, cancer, problems with your hormones and infertility, thyroid disease, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, problems with your hormones, make sure that you get there to understand the first steps you need to take in order to help you with your restoration process, guys. I can't stress that enough, is you need someone who knows how to look for these things, how to see these things, and someone who isn't just going to dump a bunch of supplements back in your system, who's following a protocol. Guys, there is no protocol. You know what the protocol is? It's based off of you, and it's based off of your testing, and it's not based off of something that I learned online or anything like that. Okay. So to register for that inflammation event, just go to the Linktree. You'll see that you can register. You'll see inflammation event, work with me in person. No, guys, I'm not currently working remotely. But if you're from the Chicagoland area, if you're not from the Chicagoland area, you can go to thewellnessway.com and you can request a doctor to work with you remotely. But from the Chicagoland area, make sure you go to that Linktree and get registered for the inflammation event that's coming up a week from tomorrow at 6:00 p.m. Central Standard Time sharp. So I can't wait for you to register for that, to see you guys there. And guys, if you're dealing with mold in your environment, please reach out to a Wellness Way doctor. But please, before you do that, start cleaning the air. There's other things that you can do if you're within a moldy environment as well. But I would say this, the solution to pollution is dilution. So start working on cleaning it and give yourself a better, healthy environment. Because remember, you're breathing those in. You're not eating them. You're breathing those things in. It's coming into contact with the barrier, specifically in the lungs, which is why it caused so many immune system issues that are going on. So guys, if you found this video enjoyable, make sure that you please share it. Make sure that you please follow us as well. I would sincerely appreciate that. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Memorial Day weekend. I hope you got a lot of recovery, rejuvenation, relaxation. And also, but as I always say, I want to say a special thank you to all of our veterans that are out there. Thank you for your service. And we appreciate you fighting for freedom. So I appreciate and love all of you guys. Make sure that you share this video. Make sure that you watched it all the way through. but specifically mold, here's some of the first steps that you need to do. But most importantly, is that if you do have it, please make sure that you are working with the Wellness Way doctor. So, guys, thank you guys for listening. Be well, be blessed. As I always say, remember,